Hello YouTube, welcome to Alice's Study Guide. I am Alice. Today we are going to talk about 10 tips that are going to help you score higher in the SAT reading test. Before we start, since this is our first meeting, I shall do a brief self-introduction. My name is Alice, as you should probably know, and I'm 16 years old, currently in 11th grade. I got a 119 and my TOEFL a 1580 on my SATs. My GPA at school is 4.72 out of 4.5. It kind of got over the edge because I took too many honors courses last semester. And my school does not provide SAT tutorials or the AP program because it is a Chinese school. So I learned all the SATs and APs and SAT2s and all the other standardized tests on my own. I took the SAT2 Mathematics Level 2, Physics, and US History, and I'm studying the AP US History, English Language and Composition, English Literature and Composition, Physics C, Calculus BC, and Statistics. Without further ado, let's dive right into my tips. So, the first tip that I have for you guys is to read the question and all the choices very, very carefully. You definitely want to make sure that you know what the question is asking you to do. Some questions might ask you to choose the answer that does not do something, so in this case I would recommend that you circle or highlight or underline or whatever the not, so that you don't forget about it and avoid the right answer. And you also have to notice the key words in the question. So what counts as key words? For example, let's take a look at the official SAT study guide, practice test 1, passage 1. From the top, which choice best describes what happens in the passage? Well, actually, this is too easy, so why shouldn't we move on? Okay, question 2. Which choice best describes the developmental pattern of the passage? So in this case, you would want to underline the developmental pattern because that is what you are looking for in the passage. That gives you a clear sense of goal so that you know what you are looking for and what your answer should be aimed at. Equally important is reading all the choices of the question. Remember, all the choices from A to D, I recommend that you read them all because sometimes you just miss a point or two and just don't realize that A is actually wrong. But then when you see D, for example, and you start thinking that, oh my god, D is right too, and then you start comparing A and D, and then you might find what you were missing before and then correct your answer. Tip number 2, method of exclusion. This is so important. When I did my SATs, I loved using method of exclusion because it really speeds up your answering the questions and it makes you feel secure after answering them because you know that you've crossed off all the wrong ones off your list. So what is left has got to be the correct answer. So how to use method of exclusion? Now, when you see a wrong choice, you just mark it off directly with your pen, like cross it off your list. And typically, after you excluded all the wrong answers, there will be one or, unfortunately, sometimes two left, but still choosing will be largely facilitated. Tip number 3, don't panic if you cannot understand the passage fully. Move on to reading the question and the answers. This is very, very important, but many people just don't believe in it. Most people think that if they cannot understand the passage fully, then they cannot get the questions correctly, so they're just stuck reading the passage over and over and over and over again without acquiring anything new to help them understand. But this is actually wrong because the questions are arranged in a logical order, so it actually facilitates your understanding and gives you a fuller view of the entire passage. This is especially important in understanding the novel and the history section. Personally, I got a full score in analysis in history and social studies, but unfortunately, I did not get full score in analysis and science. I get it that some passages you just cannot totally understand, especially history passages. But you don't have to trap yourself in the passage and read it over and over again and waste your time because that's no use. You can move on to the questions. So generally the questions are designed this way. So the first question is about the subject or the theme, and it tests if you've grasped the gist of the passage, which in most cases you can understand. And then it moves on to more specific questions, and it is ordered in the sequence that it appeared in the passage, so you can retrace back to the passage while rereading it again. So the questions are actually designed to help you understand the passage while you reread it. Tip number 4, pay special attention to the verbs. So what kind of verbs am I talking about here? Actually this goes with the method of exclusion, because while excluding all the wrong choices, crossing off them from your list, you actually have to pay special attention to the verbs at the beginning of each answer choice. For example, he fears that, he worries that, he has been offered, or he knows that. This is just an example. But often, if the verb is wrong, then you just cross it off the list immediately, because verbs are marks of wrong choices too. Especially you have to notice verbs such as reiterate or restate, because constantly it has not appeared in the passage before, so the re is actually wrong, and you just have to cross it off your list immediately. Tip number 5, avoid choosing answer choices that are too abstract. I learned this trick while studying the AP English Language and Composition test, but it turns out to be really helpful to the SATs too. Like, compared with a choice that has much higher clarity and specificity, a choice that is so abstract that you cannot even be sure of what specifically it is referring to is in often cases just the wrong answer. Like, for example, if an answer choice talks about a certain mood but doesn't specify on what mood it is, then it is often the wrong answer, and you can just cross it off your list without hesitation. And remember, this is especially in the case of history passages. Tip number 6, notice direct synonyms. This is a very important trick in doing the SAT reading questions. I don't know if you studied the TOEFL test before, but it's actually of the same concept, because in TOEFL tests, the correct answer is always the one that is the direct synonym of the original passage. Actually, in SATs, it's the same. You just have to notice it. Although it is indeed harder to notice, but this is especially the case for evidence questions. Like, if you can find an answer that consists of direct synonyms of the evidence provided in the latter question, then you can just choose it without any hesitation. It is definitely the correct answer. Noticing direct synonyms leads us to our next tip. Tip number 7, when in doubt, always refer back to the original paragraph. Like, the questions are designed to match the passage, so instead of hesitating between B and C, and ultimately hesitating wrong and choosing a wrong answer, I suggest that you just take a few minutes and go back to the paragraph and read it again, like once or twice, and you will definitely feel clearer in your head. Tip number 8, try to establish the logic link between the answer and the question. After finishing each question, take a few seconds to think about what is the connection between the question and the answer. Like, is it a cause and effect, or is the question asking about the comparison, and in the answer, you have to identify the two objects of comparison? Think about it, and then put it in your heart and remember it, so that in the next time you've encountered such questions, you can answer the question without any hesitation. It will definitely facilitate your understanding of the entire test. Tip number 9, trust your instincts. This is so very, very important. I just cannot emphasize it enough. Trust your instincts. Believe me, trust your instincts. When I first started doing the SATs, like whenever I finish a question, I would question myself whether the choice I chose is right or wrong. Like, for example, I chose B originally, but then I thought that C is slightly possible to be the right answer too. So then I would struggle within and between B and C. Then I would ultimately convince myself that C is the right answer and B is not, and then I would correct my answer from B to C. But then it always turns out that B is the right answer and C is the wrong answer. So after a couple of dozens times, I concluded that I have to trust my instincts. Then I found a reason behind this. I think that people tend to overthink about the difficulty of the SATs. It's just not that hard. It's not designed to be that hard. It is only designed to test your literal understanding, like whether you've understand the passage or not. It is not a test of your critical understanding skills or your critical thinking skills. You just have to set it aside and just read the passage and answer the questions according to the passage, and do not use any of your critical thinking skills, and don't overthink. Alright, we've reached the last tip of the day. Tip number 10. Always write your answers on the test book first. Actually, I think this is more about personal experience because to me, as I've mentioned before, I find that all these questions are interrelated and interconnected. There is a logic link between them that might connect them with the passage and ultimately facilitate your understanding of the passage. So I don't want to take the time off after finishing each question to circle and darken the little circles on the answer sheets because I find it quite distracting. But then again, it's more about personal experience. If you find that marking all the answers on the answer sheet in the last 5 minutes might be too nervous an experience for you, then you should just find your own way to organize your time because that is only my personal experience. Alright, so that's all for today. I am Alice. Thank you for taking your time to watch my channel, Alice's Study Guide. If you are interested in listening to more of my tips in the future, then please subscribe.